13th, 2021. And today, we're going to talk about quitting. This is an important topic. I've decided to make an announcement. I'm quitting poker for the remainder of 2021. I will play no more hands for the rest of the year. Sorry if this lets anyone down, but life will go on. 2022, though, we're ready and raring to go. Played a nice long online session yesterday. Took 8th place in a tournament with 1,000 people. Almost good. But yes, no more poker for the rest of the year for me because, well, both my kids have birthdays coming up. One of them's on the 19th, one's on the 24th. My birthday is the 22nd. Their holiday season's happening. Kids are off from school. My parents are going to be in town. No more poker for me. It's important to make sure you have priorities. So, this is actually a repeat of a presentation I gave to some of my poker coaching students recently. And the reason I am going through this here today is how I get this question a lot from people in the YouTube comments. Every time we do an Ask Me Anything, we get the question of, how do I know when to quit? Or how do I know when to leave a game? Or how do I know when to not to re-enter? Etc., 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 etc. So here's a question, nice and simple. I never know when to leave a game. Can you give me some tips? Simple as that. Hit that like and subscribe button. That's right. If you're enjoying the show, well, we just got started. You're probably not enjoying it yet. But if you think you're going to enjoy the show, click the like and subscribe button, also the notification bell. So, quitting applies to poker in many, many ways. For example, we're going to discuss these 4 today. When should you quit a cash game? When should you not re-enter a tournament? When should you quit it, right? When should you move down and play a lower stake? And also, finally, when should you quit playing poker? One thing that is, I don't know what the right word is, maybe concerning to me, is that no one really discusses this last point here. You're going to find a lot of people, especially in the content creation space, not all of them, but a lot of them, are paid to try to get you to play poker, whether it be on an online site, going to a training site, etc., etc. But look, whenever people come to me for poker lessons, probably, 5 or 10% of the time, my actual advice to them is you should probably quit playing poker and do something else with your life because it's just not beneficial for you or it doesn't fit in with your life currently. And sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But you all heard me say this a million times, but you have to follow the money at the end of the day. And if someone is paid to try to get you to pay a poker site rake, well, that's what they're going to try to do, right? I am paid to help you make the best financial decisions possible pertaining to poker. For some of you, that's going to mean when to quit, and we will discuss that. All right, first things first, we'll go with some initial thoughts. When you choose to do something, anything in life, when you choose to do literally anything in life, you are choosing to not do everything else you could possibly be doing. I see right now, some of you are watching this show. Thank you. But realize that by being here today with me, or by watching the replay of this in the future, you are choosing to not do whatever else you could be doing with that time. Time is very, very valuable and limited, and I would recommend you do not squander it doing things that you do not absolutely love or things that you are not necessarily going to be learning a lot from. A lot of people squander a lot of time. I know I've squandered a ton of time doing all sorts of things, some that I enjoyed, some that I did not enjoy. And that's important to realize that you cannot get that time back, and that's okay. You're not going to play great, especially in the past, but you can play better in the future, right? Also, as the amount of time you spend on something increases, the amount of happiness you experience from it usually decreases once you get above a very high amount of time. For example, I love playing Magic the Gathering. It's a fun trading card game, kind of like poker. I would play that all day, every day. But I actually did play it all day, every day for a few months, a long time ago. And you know what? I didn't like it. I was very burnt out. Same thing with poker. I used to play poker all day, every day. You know what happens? You get burnt out. Even if you absolutely love the thing that you are doing, if you do it all day, every day, you will get burnt out. Imagine if you love eating cake. You can certainly have half of a cake 5 or 6 days in a row, but after that, you're like, don't need any more cake. Right? So, understand that there will be periods of time where, especially if you do anything a lot, you will kind of be over it for a while. Okay? Also, what's this called? What's this show called? Is this called a show? This, A Little Brain Fuel, is going to presume that you are approaching poker as a professional, okay? I'm not approaching this from the point of view of you're a degenerate gambler or you are just trying to go have fun on the weekends with your friends. This presentation assumes you are trying to actually succeed as a professional poker player, someone who shows up and makes substantial money from poker. Okay? Speaking of brain fuel, I know a lot of you are going to be home, working on things at the end of the year. If you think you're going to be tired, if you want to have a little bit of extra focus, check out BRÈINFUEL.com. I like the Brain Fuel. I am not paid by them. I do own a little piece of the company. Take that for what it's worth. I enjoy it. You can use code POKERCOACHING to get a decent discount. I drink a cup of coffee and I drink this little bottle, and I'm good to go for the whole day. All right. First things first. When should you quit a cash game? Well, simply put, you should quit the cash game when the amount you expect to win no longer justifies playing. If you are a professional poker player, understand that very often you are not playing to play. You may say, what? I want to go to the casino and play poker. Professionals do not necessarily think that way. They think, when I show up and play, I'm going to make X amount of dollars per hand on average. Okay? So if we're going and we're going to make X amount of dollars per average, when you expect to no longer win an amount that justifies playing, you should pack it up. So when will that be the case? Well, very clearly, when the game is abnormally tough, you're not going to have a positive win rate. If you're not going to have a positive win rate, you're playing for no profit on average. Certainly, sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose, but you're not going to make money. There certainly is a little bit of merit in playing to get experience. You definitely should make sure you're always trying to play against tougher opponents. That said, if you're playing in your normal game, there will inevitably be times where the game is slightly tougher than normal, where you're playing against tough opponents, right? So I don't think you actively need to seek out games where you expect to have little to no win rate, or no win rate, a negative win rate, if you will be playing against very good players, right? Obviously, when you're playing against good players, pay attention, but they will inevitably just trickle into your games and trickle out of your games, so you'll get that experience that just naturally playing, so I don't think you really need to seek it out. So, I'm going to use myself as an example here, try to extrapolate it to your games. I used to go play 5-10 or 10-20 at Bellagio every day. Fine, good. I knew I was going to make something like $100 or $150 per hour playing those games. But if you show up, and my default was to play the 10-20 game because it's a bigger game and I thought I could make more money. But probably, I don't know, 30 or 40% of the days I would show up and 10-20 would just be tough. And not like unbeatably tough, but just like pretty tough. There were no clearly bad players. The 10-20 game at Bellagio back then was an interesting lineup of mostly like older guys plus a few good younger players. But the older guys were not bad. They've been playing poker for like 50 years. No limit poker for 50 years. And they were just like good, tight, aggressive players. I mean, maybe they make a mistake here and there, but they weren't punting away by any means. So very often that game was actually not all that good. And I did not have much of a positive win rate in that game. It was like $50 an hour playing in those relatively tough games. I kept track of it. And, okay, if I think I'm going to make $50 an hour in this game, but I have the option to play a different game, the 5-10 game, with way more recreational players. In that scenario, it made a whole lot of sense because I knew, even against the better 5-10 players who could not beat the 10-20 game, my win rate was something like $100 an hour, right? So, when the game is abnormally tough, you definitely should not be playing. So imagine the 5-10 game. Imagine all the bad players quit for whatever reason. I don't know what happened. Maybe they all came together and they all wanted to go see a show. Well, now, who's left? It's a bunch of pros, right? So if you're playing with a bunch of pros, you're going to have no win rate. It's probably time to pack it up. The opposite of this is when the game is abnormally soft. You should definitely be playing. I mean, I played plenty of very big games, like 50, 100, 200, 400 at Bellagio, where I'd be sitting there playing 5, 10, or 10, 20. A few gamblers would walk in and want to gamble. At No Limit Texas Hold'em, 200, 400. So you know what I do? I get up from my 5-10 game with my $3,000. I go to my box, get out a pile, and go play, right? Because then the game was going to be abnormally good. That is the time you do not quit, right? But when you have no win rate, you're essentially just trading money around for no profit, maybe a little bit of experience. But you got to realize, if you're playing 60 hours a week anyway, as you should probably be doing if you are a legitimate professional poker player whose main goal is to make money, you don't really need a whole lot more experience. You got the experience, right? So when the game is abnormally tough, you should probably pack it up. Also, when you expect to play poorly, you should probably pack it up. So when should you expect to play poorly? This is going to vary from person to person. I know that I start to play poorly after about 14 or 15 hours of play. After about 14 or 15 hours of straight play, I start to get a little bit tired. Some people are going to get tired way before that. Some people, look, in reality, most people get tired after 14 or 15 hours. So, when else can you expect to play poorly? Well, some people play poorly when they take a bad beat. That never really affected me. But I knew that after I took 4 or 5 bad beats, I would start to get a little bit annoyed. There were triggers that I could feel happening that I knew I was getting a little bit annoyed. Maybe I would put my chips in the pot just a little bit more aggressively. Maybe I would shuffle my chips on the side just a little bit more aggressively. And when I feel that happening, that's like a trigger to me to know, ooh, take a second, walk around, take a little break, relax yourself. And quite often that'll let me chill out. So you need to figure out the warning signs that you may be getting a little bit frustrated. Obviously, whenever I'm getting frustrated in these scenarios, it's usually preceded by aces losing 3 times in a row or whatever. But even then, I don't really care about aces losing 3 times in a row. It's more usually the gameplay doesn't get me so tilted. It's just more come on, really? Again? That said, don't be whiny, right? No need to be whiny, no need to bemoan your bad luck. But, look, all of us out there have some sort of tilt issue. People who say they have literally none are probably lying. And look, if I have tilt issues, they are probably incredibly minimal compared to most. But they still exist, right? And there's no reason to keep playing if you think that you're going to have tilt creeping into your game that will decrease your win rate by some amount. Now, the question is, how much will it actually decrease your win rate? Imagine you're winning at 10 big blinds per hour and it decreases it to 5 big blinds per hour. That's probably fine. But you don't really know that, right? So John says, walk away when tilted. So this is the problem with walking away when tilted. It's that you never get desensitized to tilt, or you never get used to losing, because you are going to have rough losing sessions. And going back to how professionals think, you make X amount of dollars per hand you play. Okay? Imagine you show up to the casino fully prepared to play a 12-hour session, but you know if you lose 2 all-ins, you're going to be mad and you're going to leave. It's probably going to happen once or twice a week, right? So once or twice a week, you're just not playing. Well, that's 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 hours of poker you're missing. And imagine, on average, you make $100 per hour. That's 15 hours per week. That's $6,000 per month you're giving up because you don't want to play when tilted, right? So there certainly is merit in learning to not necessarily play through tilt, but not get tilted in the first place, not get annoyed in the first place. I think a lot of people play in games where everyone reacts poorly when they get unlucky. Everyone does. And I've seen it. I used to play $5 buy-in tournaments. You get bad beat or you lose an all-in, you're supposed to throw a fit. Why? Because that's what everybody else did. But that's asinine, right? Just because your opponents are losing their minds and playing poorly and reacting poorly does not mean you have to. A lot of people think they're supposed to do what the people around them do. Period. But that is absolutely not true, right? You're going to find that very often the big winners do not do what people around them do. And you need to ask, why are the people doing the things that they're doing? And is this beneficial to them? And is there any benefit in, for example, if you actually do have a good win rate, leaving for 2 days or a day or whatever? The answer is no, right? Is there any benefit to getting annoyed and then trying to play the next pot really aggressively to try to win your money back? No, right? That's dumb. So, don't do dumb things. Turns out if you don't do dumb things, you're probably going to win more money from poker, right? You're going to win more money or you're going to do better at all aspects of life if you don't do dumb things. So, you need to figure this out, right? So, that said, when you expect to play abnormally poorly, you should leave. So what I did, again, I'm just purely extrapolating from my experience, or I'm telling you my experience so you can extrapolate to you. I had 2 rules when I played cash games. We discussed them here before. If you're new here, welcome. Click the like and subscribe button below. Also click the notification bell. My 2 rules were, I would play from noon until midnight. It takes an exceptionally soft game for me to play longer than 12 hours. It probably happened once every 2 weeks I would play longer than 12 hours, or once every 3 weeks, something like that. Not very often. And usually the games were ridiculously soft. So, what does that do? That protects me from the downside of knowing that I know I don't do well 13, 14, 15 hours into the day. So, pack it up after 12. And look, maybe I could try to play even more hours than I was back then, but I mean, I was playing like 70 hours a week. I don't think I really need to do more or be able to do more, right? At some point, you have to be okay with your skill set. That said, if you can play 4 hours at a time before you get tilted, you probably got to work on that, right? I was kind of lucky in that I was trained as a kid to put in long hours because of this game, Magic the Gathering. You would go and you'd play a Magic the Gathering tournament, and it would take all day, like 12 hours, right? And so I started doing this a long time ago as a kid. And it turns out that was a good training ground for this particular skill. So I was lucky that I was trained at this as a young person just by way of the other things I was doing. But you need to be able to put in long sessions for cash games, etc. And tournaments, obviously, because you can't quit in a tournament. So that was rule number 1. After 12 hours, I'm done. Period. Unless the game is abnormally soft. And if the game's abnormally soft, I'm usually like pretty excited because your win rate is going to go from $100 an hour to like $400 per hour, right? Second rule I had for myself is if I got down about 450 big blinds, three buy-ins at the 5-10 game, you could buy in for $1,500, so $4,500. If I got down $4,500, I would quit. Down from my starting point, not like if I got up 5K and then lost down to plus 500, I would not quit. But if I ever got down 4,500, I would pack it up. Sometimes I would break that rule if the game was abnormally soft. Again, I was competent and cognizant enough to realize that sometimes the game's super soft. Also, it kind of depended on how I lost, too. Like, if you're just getting it in with aces pre-flop and losing, it's like, whatever, who cares? But if you are, like, making loose calls and they just seem to all be wrong, or you're running bluffs and they're just all getting called, it's like, maybe they have my number. Who knows? It's tough to know. Presumably, though, whenever you are losing, on average, the game will be tougher than normal. Because, naturally, whenever you have a lower win rate, you will have more losses. Right? So, those were the 2 rules I set for myself that protected me from any sort of substantial downside, and I played those games 2 years straight, and I think I had 0 losing months. 0. My worst month was like plus $10,000. Because I literally never played annoyed, and I always played in at least reasonable games. Obviously, you should be table selecting, game selecting, etc. Also, another time to not play is when you are abnormally unhappy in a game. When will you be abnormally unhappy in a game? Well, maybe you have something else to do, right? Maybe you have other responsibilities in life. Maybe you really don't like playing with a particular player for one reason or another. I would say that you hopefully don't let that discourage you from playing too often, but there are going to be some people that really rub you the wrong way. Maybe you don't play with them. It's voluntary, right? Realize it is voluntary to play poker. That said, this should be something that makes you not play very rarely. And if it is something that's making you not play, you need to figure out why this is. And you need to figure out how to fix it, right? But again, the main point here, you should not quit when the game is amazingly soft. You should not quit when the game is amazingly soft. Something a lot of people do that absolutely crushes them long term is that when they get up in a cash game, they quit. If you get up and you quit, well, if you get up money and you quit, every time, you're probably not going to win long term. Especially if you do not lose, or if you do not quit when you immediately lose. What a lot of people do is they want to leave the table a winner. They really want to leave a winner. Why? I don't know. I guess humans are wired to think, if I'm up money, I'm a winner. And if I'm a winner, I'm a success. But if you think about it, in almost all sessions you play, you're going to be up $1 at some point. So, if you're going to be up $1 at some point, you could always quit then. Should you just quit then and be a winner every time? Well, the answer is no, because you're not going to be a winner actually every time. You're going to have losing sessions, and when you lose, you're usually going to lose a ton. And again, if you make money per hand dealt, you don't really care if you win or lose on any individual session. Back when I used to play 5, 10, and 10, 20, I would be down at the end of my 12-hour session Something like 40% of the time, maybe even 45% of the time, like a pretty good amount of the time. But my wins were always about, on average, twice as big as my losses. So at 5-10, if I'm losing 3K or winning 6K, and it's a 50-50 thing, right? It means every 2 sessions we play, I win what? $3,000. Does that sound right? Something like that? Am I getting that right? Yeah, 3,000 profit divided by 2, 1,500. Yeah, which makes sense, right? If I'm playing 8 or 10 hour sessions, there you go. So that's okay. And you will go periods of time where you lose many sessions in a row. I mean, I say many. Now look, if you're playing with a big win rate, it's going to be like 3 or 4, right? Like I said, I really did not have many downswings in the game. My biggest downswing I remember was something like 18K, which was 1,800 big blinds, which is not a lot. I was probably lucky over the quote-unquote small sample of 2 years straight, 70 hours a week. But you should not quit when the game is soft, because that's when you are going to be winning. And typically when you're up, the game is softer than normal. Like when you're down, the game's often tougher than normal on average. So the idea of I'm going to quit when I'm up is ridiculous. And if that is the logic you employ, realize you're probably not going to make it. Okay? If anything, you want to cap your losses and have your wins uncapped. That said, if you can play perfectly all the time, then you just should not care, right? Again, you make money per hand dealt. You want to be dealt into as many hands as possible, and that's that. But if you are down, presumably the game is slightly tougher than normal, and when you're down, you're presumably more likely to go on tilt. When you're up, usually the game is softer, and usually you're less likely to go on tilt, right? So obviously, don't quit when you're up, quit when you're down. Okay. Next thing. When should you not re-enter a tournament? Also, everyone asking questions. This is not an Ask Me Anything. Why didn't you tell me this didn't look right? Come on, everybody. Help me out here. Help me out. You gotta tell me when my little program doesn't look right. Let's see. Something like that. This is not Ask Me Anything. We'll have those later. As you can see, we have a presentation here for all of you discussing a specific, concise topic. Feel free to type in the questions. I probably won't answer them, though, unless they're very, very on point. All right. When should you not re-enter a tournament? What's a re-entry tournament? Well, most tournaments today are re-entry tournaments where you can re-enter if you lose. Simple as that. So when you re-enter, it is as if you are playing another tournament. Not the same tournament, another tournament for all practical purposes. Usually that tournament's going to have a worse structure than the first tournament you played. Because imagine you buy in early in the tournament, you start with 200 big blinds, you play for 5 hours, you bust, and then you buy in again. Well, now you're buying in for a tournament with like 30 or 40 big blinds, right? And whenever you have a smaller stack, typically your return on investment is going to be lower if you are a good player. Now, if you're a bad player, you want to buy in last second, because then you will play as few hands as possible with a short stack, and you can't really screw it up all that bad. So whatever mistakes you make are going to be minimal. But nobody does that. Everybody thinks they're good, which is good for the pros. But anyway, say you bust with your 30 big blind stack after an hour or two, and now you buy in again and you have 8 big blinds. Okay. It's as if we've played 3 tournaments here. Some people get it in their heads that now they have to take, top 3% to get their money back. But no. Remember, each one is an individual entry. Very, very important. So, when should you not re-enter? You thought it was good enough to play the first time. We play, we bust. Now we are not considering not playing the second time. So, when should we not re-enter? You should not re-enter when you expect to have a tiny or negative return on investment. When will that be? That will usually be when the rake is high. Imagine you are playing a $100 tournament in your local casino that takes 20% rake. Okay? Can you beat 20% rake buying in last second with 12 big blinds? Probably not. It's hard to beat 20% rake whenever you have 12 big blinds. Now, maybe you're getting closer to the money. It certainly is true that when you buy in last second, you're more likely to get a minimum cash, right? Because you just have to win 2 or 3 flips. But you're probably not going to beat 18 or 20% return on investment. So, in games where they have a high rake, very often you should not be re-entering. Period. When would you expect to have a negative ROI against your opponents? This is probably not going to be the case for most of you, but In the high-stakes games, if you are playing and you look at the field remaining when you're considering re-entering, sometimes it'll be really, really tough, and sometimes it'll be really, really soft. There's one year at Bellagio where they had a WPT, and it was a re-entry tournament. And one year, I think the first year they made it re-entry, a lot of the weaker players just got a hold of a lot of the chips naturally in the re-entry period. So all the pros kept re-entering, right? And they got a ton of players. The next year, all the good players got a hold of the chips, and nobody re-entered. Because why would you re-enter if all the good players have all the chips already, right? So if you are playing in a tournament where there are some very clearly world-class players and some very clearly not world-class players, when the world-class players have all the chips, you should not expect to have much of a positive ROI. Even if you're good, right? It's going to be neutral. And if you're neutral, you're losing the rake. So there you go, right? That's a good time to not re-enter, even if you think you have a bit of an ROI. Also, you have to ask, like, say you do have a 2% return on investment on a $1,000 tournament, you're going to make $20 playing the game, and it's going to take you 2 hours. Is it worth it for you to play 2 hours in a $1,000 tournament to make $20 on average? The answer is no. Again, professionals think in terms of averages, not sometimes I win huge. It's $1 million guarantee. I can win 200,000. Like, you can, but you have to think in terms of your actual ROI. Whenever I show up to play a poker tournament, I only care about what I perceive my return on investment to be. Is that worth the risk and the volatility to my bankroll? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, right? Good example to this is at the World Series this year. They had 3 big tournaments that I could have possibly played. They had a 250K, a 100K, and a 50K. In all of these, I could sell action to make them play roughly the size I want them to play, which is roughly 25K or 30K. Not bankrolled enough to have to play $250,000 tournaments without any real risk of ruin. Not that rich yet. Maybe one day. So, if I want to play $30,000 tournaments, I can sell action to make them all play like a 30K to me, which is what I did. And now the question becomes, should I play all of them? And the answer is no. Why? Because the 250K is going to be substantially more difficult than the 50K. There's going to be way fewer recreational players in the 250K, and the pros in the 250K are all going to be top-notch, right? Whereas in the 50K, you're going to have some weaker pros who are like still good, but like not smashing it, maybe even losing a little bit, and you're going to have way more recreational players. And turns out that was true. My assessment of the situation, as a professional poker player who's been around the block and knows what these fields look like, knew that I would probably have no return on investment at all, or maybe 2% in that 250K, but, 5 or 10% in the other ones. I think that's probably about right. And why would I play the 2% one whenever I could do something else on that day and or just play a $5,000 tournament with a 20% return on investment or something, right? Because it just makes more sense. If I'm playing them all for 30K with a minimal or no ROI, it makes no sense, right? So when you expect to have a tinier negative ROI, don't play. You don't have to play. Just because a game exists does not mean that you have to play. Next, don't play when you're no longer properly bankrolled for the game. This often comes up when you are playing games that are at the higher end of your average buy-in. For example, say you normally play $200 tournaments, but at your local casino, they have a $1,000 tournament that takes place every quarter, let's say. Every 3 months. Should you play it? Well, if they have a big guarantee on it, meaning they're going to attract a lot of recreational players, it probably makes sense for you to play that $1,000 tournament. So let's say you have $30,000 to your bankroll. You're normally playing $200 games every day at your casino, whatever. Making, let's say you make $50 a day or $75 a day on average. And this is proven, right? You clearly have a good ROI in these $200 tournaments. You should probably play that $1,000 tournament. You're going to have roughly the same ROI, maybe even bigger if they have a lot of satellite qualifiers or giveaway winners or whatever. And just like a lot of recreational players to begin with. So you're going to have a good ROI in that game. And it doesn't happen all that often, right? You have to realize that this doesn't occur all that often. And therefore, it's almost like you're taking your profits from 1 or 2 weeks out of the 3 months and putting it into this one where you can have a good spike. And I think that's perfectly fine and viable. Kind of like you see a lot of players who play $1,000 tournaments playing the World Series main event each year. They're not bankrolled for it at all, because in that tournament you actually need a lot of buy-ins because it's a huge field tournament. But, if you spend, 2 weeks of your profit each year, or 3 weeks, or a month of your profit each year to play the main event, it's probably fine. It's probably fine. So that happens, and that's fine and good. But say you bust a tournament on the first hand, you get it all in with aces, and you lose to kings, and you lose. Fine, whatever. Should you re-enter? Well, if you have the $30,000 bankroll and you lose 1,000 of it, it's probably okay to play it again, assuming you're still fine and sane. Now, I will say, when you're playing on the upper end of your average buy-in, you may not be fine and sane after losing the aces to kings on the first hand. Maybe you will be, maybe you won't. You have to figure that out. So you may play poorly. Don't re-enter when you expect to play poorly. You see the next point. But say you decided to take a shot with like a $15,000 bankroll, which, is aggressive. Say you had $15K, which is probably okay for local small field $200 tournaments where you have a big edge. You decide to play the 1K and you lose first hand. Well, now we just lost, what is that? A 15th of our bankroll. Should we play the tournament again? The answer is probably not. And you must be disciplined enough to not play it again. A lot of people are not, though. They feel peer pressure. They think, oh, all my friends are playing. They're all still in. I was the first one out. I can't let this guy who is awful at poker or my rival at the casino outlast me. Like, all these are irrational thoughts. The only rational thought here, assuming you're trying to make money from poker, is, am I properly bankrolled for this game currently? Answer is probably not. Are you going to play perfectly from this point on? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But, obviously, if perfectly is presumed, then you're only going to do equal or worse than. You're not going to do better than. So this is a spot where you should probably not re-enter. So whenever you are no longer bankrolled for the game, you should probably not re-enter. This usually comes up, like I said, when you're playing at the higher end of your average buy-in, assuming you're not like really, really, really properly bankrolled. Poker Invest says, you're a big fan. Thanks for your content. Well, thank you for being here. If you all enjoy this show, click the like and subscribe button. Also, check out pokercoaching.com/free. If you are not already a Poker Coaching member, we have some content there for you. All right. When you expect to play poorly, don't re-enter. Like I said, if you're tilty or whatever, don't re-enter. But again, don't go on tilt. Don't be annoyed. Look, it's going to sound bad, but if you are someone who goes on tilt in 2021, you're going to have a tough time winning at medium or high stakes games because your opponents, who are anywhere near decent, are not going on tilt and playing poorly. Because look, I can tell you, if Jonathan Little goes on tilt and plays poorly, it's probably going to be playing like a little bit too tightly pre-flop. That's how I'm going to go on tilt. And that is not bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's not perfect, but it's certainly not bad. Most of your opponents are not just going to all of a sudden start massively bluffing off for no reason whatsoever. They just don't do that anymore. They're not going to spew off. And if they do, they don't make it. They go broke very quickly because you are going to experience swings in your stack. Some of the online sites will actually show you a graph of everyone's stack throughout the tournament. You'll see that everyone's stack goes up, and then it goes down, and it goes up, and it goes down, and it goes up, and it goes down. It's like zigzag back and forth all the time, right? And if you go on tilt every time you go down, you're not going to win. Hello from Latvia. Hello, Krish. Hope you're having a great, great day. So anyway, this is another point where, like, if you expect to play poorly, you probably should not be playing. Is online poker a good start? Yes. Variance is part of the game. Indeed, John, indeed. All right, when should you move down in stakes? Ooh, this is something that crushes a lot of players because they have a problem with pride. So many poker players want to think that they are the best, and they want to show everyone that they are the best. It's important to consider, why do you actually play poker? And for most people, the answer is not to make money. For a lot of people, the answer is to stroke their ego, which is fine. You got to realize that that's okay. But at the same time, if that's your goal, you're not going to win as much money as possible. A lot of people don't do a lot of things in life without really asking, why are they doing that thing? I think it's very important, though, to always ask and consider why you are doing what you are doing, because quite often, if you gave it a little bit of thought, you'd realize that what you're doing is actually suboptimal to what you, in theory, really want, right? For example, if you quit every time you take a bad beat, you're not going to make as much money from poker as if you didn't quit after every time you went bad beat, right? So understand that if your goal is to win as much money as possible, sometimes that means you must move down. Because if you play too big for your bankroll, you will inevitably either go broke or give yourself a very good chance of going broke. And if you go broke, your earning potential goes from whatever your hourly rate is to nothing, right? So let's say you're bankrolled for 2-5 no limit at your local casino. You have a solid, $20,000 bankroll. probably a little bit low. Let's say you have $20,000 bankroll though, and you lose down to 10,000. You have 20 buy-ins for your 2-5 game. Should you keep playing? Probably not. You should probably move down to 1-3. The nice thing about moving down is it does a few very good things for you. It doubles your bankroll in terms of big blinds, right? Roughly doubles it. I realize 1-3 is not half the size of 2-5, but it roughly doubles your bankroll in terms of big blinds. So you go from having 20 buy-ins to 40 buy-ins immediately, or whatever it is. So that's good. Also, when you move down, you are presumably going to be playing with weaker players because those players can't beat 2-5, because if they could beat 2-5, they'd be playing 2-5. So that's good. So you're going to have a higher win rate with twice as many buy-ins in your bankroll, which is fantastic, right? Now, the problem that a lot of people have is that they don't want to walk in the casino and have all of their 2-5 peers look at them playing the 1-3 and think, oh man, that guy must be having a tough time, or he must be bad at poker, he must be running out of money, he must be failing, right? But you have to realize this is an inevitable part of the game. And if you do not move down as is required, you will go broke, or at least have a good chance of going broke. And like I said, if you go broke or have no money, or you're playing with a tiny bankroll, you're going to feel an immense amount of stress and pressure. And also if you run out of money or have zero win rate, right? So you must move down, and you must realize that the idea of what other people think about you does not really matter all that much. Okay? All right, next. You should also move down in stakes when you do not expect to have a significantly positive hourly rate in your current game. This happened to me whenever I was properly bankrolled to play 25-50 or 200-400 even at Bellagio. I did not expect to have a big win rate in the regular 25-50 or 50-100 game that ran. So I'd be playing 10-20 there, and there would often be a 25-50 game, and I would just not play it. So here I am, properly bankrolled, but I'm not playing the game. Why am I not playing the game? It's because I did not expect to be able to win a whole lot of money in the game. I looked around the table, it's almost entirely good pros, maybe one bad player who's not even that bad. So would I rather make, let's say $100 per hour to $150 per hour at 25-50 with infinite swings, because you're going to have a low win rate, or would I rather play 5-10 and make $120 per hour with literally no swings? Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? And you may say, well, you're going to make more money at 25-50, and you're going to get to play against better players, so you're going to get better faster. True, but I'm literally never going to go broke playing 5-10, and I can play it around the clock, right? Whereas the 25-50 game didn't run all the time. And I'm going to have actually no risk of going broke, which was very important to me. I have never been the type of player who wanted to risk going broke. I realize a lot of people don't care if they go broke. I prefer having money than not, personally. So if I prefer having money than not, I should not do anything to risk going broke. And sometimes that results in you playing in a game where you win slightly less money, and that's okay, right? Now, if the difference was like $400 per hour or $100 per hour, then obviously I'm going to play the $400 per hour game. But that's not what I was experiencing. I was not good enough to win at that rate, right? And I recognize this. I don't have an ego problem where I'm thinking, yeah, I'm the best player. Because I realize, look, everybody there has devoted their life to getting good at poker. No reason to think I'm going to be substantially better than anybody else. So I didn't play the game, right? It was as if I voluntarily moved down by not even playing the game to begin with. And like I said as well, whenever I showed up to Bellagio, planning to play 10-20, if the game was not good, I'd play 5-10, right? And if I happen to lose a substantial amount of money at 5-10, I would realize, okay, there's a problem here. I'm not good at this game. And either I would move down or I would just stop playing. Remember, just because a game exists does not mean that you have to play. I've watched so many pretty good short stack tournament players try to play 5-10 and 10-20 no limit and get absolutely crushed. Why? Because they don't really understand the game. It's a different game when you're playing very deep stack compared to when you're playing shallow stacked, right? So you must be aware that your skill set at one game is not ideal for all games. Okay? A lot of people think that just because they're good at, let's say, No Limit Hold'em, that they must be good at Pot Limit Omaha, or that they're good at No Limit tournaments, they must be good at cash games, or whatever, right? And so you have to realize that just because you have skill at something does not mean you are good at something else. So many people on social media make this blunder. Should we get into this? Yeah, sure. A lot of poker players think that just because they're good at poker, they must be good at other things. Like, let's say, sports betting or daily fantasy sports or cryptocurrencies or politics or whatever. Understand that if you are not a legitimate expert at other things, your opinion does not matter all that much. And it hurts a lot of people's ego to think that they can be really good at something, but bad at something else that they've spent some time on, right? And you got to realize that if you spent the last 10 years of your life trying to get good at poker, and you've spent 30 minutes a day for the last 6 months trying to get good at something else, you're not good at it, most likely, right? And there's no reason to think that just because you're good at one form of poker that you must be good at another form of poker. So, I made this blunder whenever I was a kid. I was really good at sit and goes. Really, really good at sit and goes. And I went to go play multi-table tournaments using that exact same strategy that I used in sit and goes. And you know what happened? I lost because I was playing in a different game. Sit and goes are different than multi-table tournaments. Because in sit and goes, you have to get in the top 30% of the field to get money, whereas in tournaments, you have to get in the top 2% of the field to get any real amount of money. And that requires a different strategy. Who would have thought? So I had to go back and I had to learn again. I had to realize, like, look, I'm not good at this game. I presumed I would be good, but that was a dumb assumption. But that was a good learning experience for me. Because I was, 20, 21 years old, realizing, hey, just because I'm really good at one form of poker does not mean I'm good at all forms of poker. And that saved me a lot of trouble and heartache because I watched a lot of other players have this problem and just never learned the lesson, right? Maybe they had some success in the beginning. Imagine I played the first tournament. Or imagine the first tournament I played, I showed up and I won. I'd think, oh, I'm good at tournaments, right? And then I'd go off the deep end. So anyway, understand that just because you're good at one thing does not mean you're going to be good at something else. And a lot of people like to think that they are better than they are across the board at everything. I don't know why this is. I think I'm lucky that I naturally think I'm worse than I am at most things. But from talking to a lot of people, it's usually one of the two. Either people drastically underestimate their skill level or they drastically overestimate it. And you have to make a point to figure out how you typically view yourself, right? Okay. When else should you move down in stakes? Well, when you expect to have a higher win rate in the lower stake game, going back to 5, 10, and 10, 20 for me, I thought my win rate at 10, 20 was like $150 an hour when the game was good. But the game's only good about half the time. When the game's not good, I thought I'd win at about $50 per hour. So, when the game's not good, don't play it and go play the soft 5, 10 game where we're going to make $100 per hour, obviously. Would you rather make $50 an hour with a lot of variance or $100 an hour with no variance? That's an easy one. A lot of people get it in their heads, though. I'm a 10-20 player. I'm one of the players that sits up there on the top area, in the private area with the big players. Can't go sit in the middle of the poker area at the 5-10 table. Oh, no, 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 no. That would be a big hit to my ego. People actually think this. And that's ridiculous because you'd rather make 100 with no variance or 50 with variance. Duh, 100 with no variance. Get your chips, go sit in the soft game. I'm a coach and also a therapist. Look, I do my best. I've learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. A lot of these things I'm talking about, I have felt myself. And I realize that this is how a lot of people think and how a lot of people feel. I'm very lucky to be in a spot where I've spoken to a lot of poker players as their coach who have all sorts of skill levels from really, really novice to really, really world class. And they deal with different issues as you move up higher and higher in stakes. But ego is a problem that gives a lot of people issues. One thing a lot of people don't really realize until they start playing the really high stakes is that putting in volume is actually one of the hardest things to do online. It's really, really easy to slack off when you're an online poker player, just not play a session or not register for the full schedule of tournaments or whatever. And the people who put in the most volume are almost always the ones who win. So, but that's a problem really, really high stake players have that recreational players can't even fathom because they want to play poker as much as they can, right? So anyway, you got to be willing to move down. You got to be willing to move down, especially when you're no longer bankrolled and you don't think you're winning in the game. So many people hate to admit that they are not winning in a game, but you must be self-aware and realize maybe you're not winning, right? And this is why it's important to take notes and talk to other players who are playing the games and get like their good, honest opinions. Obviously, don't talk to like a predatory pros and say, oh yeah, you're really good, you should definitely be playing the game. But talk to friends. It's important to make friends, people who will be honest with you. And I mean, yeah, that's very, very important to find people who will give you legitimate, good feedback and not just try to trick you, essentially. So anytime you're pushing up in stakes, by the way, you're going to deal with this, where you will probably not have great results. Because whenever you move up in stakes, you're not going to know the regulars, you're not going to know the recreational players, and you're not necessarily going to know what is required to win. There's a good chapter in Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, one of the books I wrote with a bunch of other poker pros, by Ed Miller, on how to move up in stakes and stay there. And it essentially says, learn how the good players are beating the weak players, and learn how to beat the good players. And then you'll probably be fine. And it's true. Obviously, it's a little bit more easier said than done, but it takes some time, right? And also, you're going to find that when you move up in stakes, you may have nerves, or you may be slightly risk averse, or whatever, right? And that's important to note, that you may experience that as you move up. So be aware of that, and don't be afraid to move back down. A lot of people have an ego problem, though. Don't have an ego problem. Please don't have an ego problem. Your ego is not your amigo, as I saw someone's shirt say one time. All right, next. When should you quit playing poker? Poker coaching is great. Use it nearly every day. Awesome, Tim. I'm glad to hear it. Uppy says you enjoy the coaching. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Thanks to all of you for the kind words. John loves it as well. Good, good, good. Okay, when should you quit playing poker? Something almost no one talks about, but, you know, we have to have real talk here every once in a while. So, first things first, if you're no longer properly bankrolled, you should probably quit. If you're out of money, you should probably quit. Right? Obviously. You probably don't want to go into an immense amount of debt trying to play poker. Now, I know the old school pros took pride in the fact that they would often be broke because they were often pushing the limits and playing with 2 buy-ins to their name. And I don't know anyone who is successful who has done that over the last year or 2. Or 4 or 5 or 8. Pretty much everyone who is often broke and in debt does not make it. Okay? Don't go broke. Play properly bankrolled. I have, 15 really close poker friends, and all of them had never been anywhere near broke. And we started playing a long time ago, right? I mean, maybe we were fortunate to start playing a long time ago where the games were soft and we had a big win rate and that gave us a big bankroll. But even then, a lot of us are still pushing up in terms of average buy-in and still not going broke, right? So you want to make sure that you are playing properly bankrolled. Next, quit playing when you're no longer profitable. This happens for a few reasons. One, as you get older, like, 70, 80, 90, your cognitive abilities will decline. Most of the time. Not always, most of the time. I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions out there. But I coach a decent number of older poker players, and they all tell me that they just make silly mistakes, and they don't even necessarily know why. They know looking back that it was a silly mistake, and they don't really know why they're doing it. And it's my job as a coach to try to figure out, why are you doing this, or what systems can we put in place to ensure you don't do this mistake in the future? And it's kind of difficult. One of the players, for example, I know I've recommended him sleep as much as he possibly can. It seems like he can play pretty great poker for about 3 hours at a time. But he really wants to win a World Series of Poker circuit ring. Why? Because somebody else in his home game has one. All right, well, that might be an error. Can't do anything about it. If the guy wants to do it, I'm not going to try to talk him out of it too much. I will try to talk him out of it a little bit, but not too much. So, fine, he wants to win this ring. How do we do it? Well, the answer is, if you can only play poker great for 3 hours at a time, you got to sleep as much as you possibly can. So dinner break, he's taking a nap. He's sleeping until 11:30 when the tournament starts at noon, etc., right? And that has given him a decent chance of success, right? So quite often when people get older, their cognitive abilities decline. That'll probably be something that people can cancel me for saying in 5 years. I'm not trying to be offensive at all, just telling you what I'm observing. Sometimes your game just dies. Your game gets difficult. Why would this happen? This often happens in home games. If you're playing private games, then if you have a small player pool and 2 or 3 of the bad players quit or go broke or whatever, the game may become all good pros. And if that's the case, then you're done. The game's no longer profitable. Time to quit playing, at least in that game. What about if you're playing a game and the host decides to up the rake? Well, game's probably not going to be profitable. Well, it may not be profitable. I don't know. You got to figure it out. Pack it up. So whenever like game dynamics change, you have to quit. You may have to quit. Quite often in most local areas, when poker first starts, the game will be amazing, and then the game will eventually die out. I remember when poker opened in, I think it was Cleveland. A few poker pros I know went there to play, like 5, 10, and 10, 20 no limit, and they cleaned up for about a year and a half. It turns out whenever games open in like big cities, but not like the biggest cities, like not like LA or Miami, but Cleveland, not the biggest city, but it's certainly not a small city. The games are usually pretty good for a while. If the games are pretty good for a while, you can go there and clean up. But the games will inevitably die out because the bad players will lose their money and there's not enough bad players coming in to fill the seats, right? And if that's the case, the game may slowly die out. Next, when you no longer enjoy playing. What if you really don't like poker? Well, you're probably just burnt out because you're playing too much. But look, after you've done something 40, 50, 60 hours a week for 10 years, you may be over it. If you're over it, then, maybe find something else to do. The problem some good poker players run into is that they have, I guess you call it the golden handcuffs on, where they know they can make $100 or $200 per hour playing poker, but they have literally no other life skills. Because that's what happens when you play poker 60 hours a week for 10 years straight. So, if they have no other life skills, what can they do? Well, the answer is nothing. They can do nothing else in the world that's going to make them $100 per hour. So they're kind of stuck, right? Hopefully, you don't paint yourself into a corner to the point that you only have one option. You want to keep your options open. If I've learned one thing from games, it is that options are very, very valuable. You always want to have options. Otherwise, you may be stuck doing something you don't particularly enjoy. So, if you no longer enjoy playing, I would not necessarily say to quit poker, but some people just really, really dislike it after a while. And I mean, I've certainly had periods in my life where I did not love playing poker. If you lose every tournament you play, and you're playing a lot of tournaments, it's not a whole lot of fun. That's okay, right? Obviously, there's variance, right? A lot of people have this feeling where they feel the losses way worse than they feel the wins, right? So imagine you win a tournament and you're like, okay, good, but if you lose a tournament, you're devastated. Obviously, you're going to be devastated a lot, right? Because you usually lose. And if that's the case, then maybe tournaments aren't for you. That said, if you really hate losing, period, maybe poker's not for you, right? Certainly, everyone is not naturally emotionally designed to play poker. There are plenty of games where if you are better than your opponent, you win almost every time. Now, the problem with those games is that it's hard to make money from those games. But maybe playing games isn't for you. And that's okay, right? You also want to consider quitting poker when you can make better use of your time doing something else. This often comes up for smaller stakes players who are, pretty good at poker. They can make $25 or $30 per hour playing poker. But that's not a great living. It's a fine living, but it's not a great living, and they want a great living. Perhaps they already have a degree. Maybe they have an engineering degree. They wanted to just go try being a poker player. They made 20 or 30 bucks an hour, but they know they can make 20 or 30 or $40 per hour being an engineer, and they will have no variance. Well, you probably should be an engineer, because that way you get insurance perhaps, you get a retirement account perhaps, you get to build things perhaps, which I think humans are naturally wired to try to build things. And if you could be using your time better elsewhere, you should probably do that. Now, this kind of goes back to the idea of should you be even playing a game? I'll give you an example that happens for me. At the World Series of Poker, what I used to do is I would go out there for like 2 months, and I would play the tournament that started every day at noon. They used to start at noon back then instead of 11. And if I busted before 7 or 8 p.m., I'd go play cash games till midnight. Okay? That's what I do every day for 2 months. And the logic here was that I'm going to make some money from the tournament, then I'll make $300 or $400 per day playing cash games on average. And that's fine and good. So at the end of every month, or at the end of the 2 months, I'd make 300 times 60, What's 3 times 6? $18,000. I made $18,000 from the cash games, give or take. And then I'd win or lose some tournaments, whatever. It didn't make a difference. And that's fine and good. Okay. Now, though, I have a wife and 2 kids. Is it worth playing all the tournaments and making $18,000 to not be with my wife and kids for 2 months? For some people it will be, for some people it will not be. For me it is not. So obviously I'm not going to do that anymore, right? I could make a better use of my time doing something else. Also, I have a training site, pokercoaching.com. Check it out. At this World Series of Poker, we hosted 2 breakfasts for poker coaching students. That takes a lot of time and effort to prepare, right? I also had I had meetings with my employees. That took some days, right? I also have a YouTube channel. Do you all know I have a YouTube channel? YouTube.com/pokercoaching. Go check it out. Click the like and subscribe button. And I spent 4 days, 4 whole days, recording content in a sound studio with me and my other poker coaching coaches and some of our students. Some of that content's already on youtube.com/pokercoaching. So this is me making better use of my time than playing a $1,000 no limit tournament, right? And I made a point to schedule things to where I wasn't skipping any of the tournaments I really wanted to play. I still played every tournament that I actually wanted to play, like 5K, 10K buy-in tournaments and bigger. And I still got a lot of other work done doing things that I think would be a better use of my time. And that inevitably resulted in me playing like 8 tournaments this World Series, whereas in the past I would play like 40, right? So some people look at that and think, oh man, he's not playing poker. He must not be good at poker. But in reality, I'm just making better use of my time doing something else, right? Because I realize making these YouTube videos is valuable. Now, I'm probably going to make a whopping $0.0 from this exact video here and for most of my videos, but they're good for helping out all of you. And it turns out if you help out people a lot, they're happy to help you out in the future. I'm all for helping out people now and they will help me out later, right? And that's important to realize. So Mark says, it's kind of like you already paid your dues to get to this point. Well, no, view it differently, right? I'll give you another example. Whenever I met my wife, one of her colleagues at work, she was a lawyer, one of her colleagues at work was a very, very world-class lawyer in his particular field. He also happened to be a world-class pot limit Omaha player. This is back in the full tilt days. He was making, call it $40,000 a month playing pot limit Omaha. Solid $500,000 a year. Obviously had a lot of variance, whatever. This guy's making $500,000 a year playing pot limit Omaha. Let's say he made $300K as a lawyer. Okay, should he quit being a lawyer? He asked me, you know what I told him? No. Absolutely not. Why? Because you don't know how long the game's going to last, point number 1. And also, there's an immense amount of variance in the game, which maybe you're experiencing, maybe you're not, point number 2. And also, you have a good job. You can play poker on the side. Also, your lawyering job doesn't really interfere so much with your poker playing, because you play poker on nights and weekends when the games are soft, right? And you do your lawyering during the day when the games are bad, right? So, my answer to him was absolutely not. Do not quit. And he almost quit his job. He almost didn't listen, but he decided to listen. Then the games died, and now he's very glad he has his good job, right? But that's a good example of someone who could very clearly make a better use of their time doing something else without having to pay their dues at poker, et cetera, right? They just had a good job before they found poker. Or maybe he found, I don't know when he found poker actually, but he had a good job that made sense to not quit to play poker. Now, if you are a young person with not a whole lot going on, then maybe poker makes sense. If you don't like your job at all and you don't make a whole lot of money from it, you should probably try to find something else to do, poker or something else. And anyway, that's that. World-class lawyers make more than $300K. Andy, this guy had the sweetest setup in the world. He would work about 30 hours per week doing something he was really good at. Never had to work late. Never had to work nights and weekends. He had a good gig. Most lawyers who make a lot of money work all the time. I know because my wife's a lawyer. Playing poker only on the weekends is the best option, probably. Well, for some people, for sure. Also, what a lot of people don't realize is that if you think, I will quit my 9-to-5 job and play poker during that time, you're going to be sadly disappointed, because that's very often when poker games are not all that good. So anyway, if you can make better use of your time doing something else, then you gotta set priorities, right? And For me personally, poker is like number 5 on the list now because I have a lot of other stuff going on. I have my family, I have my training site. What else do we have? I guess poker's number 3. Family, training site, poker. There you go. So realize your time is limited and you must spend it wisely. You must spend your time wisely. Time is very, very limited. Do Mushroom said, when to quit poker? When you realize the bots are taking over the poker world online. Well, realize that all games are not beatable. A long time ago, someone tried to make a Chinese poker site. And it turns out Chinese poker is very, very, very easily bottable. Because it's just, there is a GTO strategy. So they did various things to change the games. But, that's not a good game to play. Even if you're good at playing the game live, you can't beat the bot playing online, right? And the tough thing about bots online is that they are, well, it's going to sound bad, but the people who are trying to cheat are often more sophisticated than people trying to stop the people from cheating. And the people who are trying to stop the people from cheating are always 1 or 2 steps behind the cheaters, right? And certainly the good licensed regulated sites do everything they can to try to stop the bots. But look, if you're playing on an unlicensed, unregulated, illegal gambling site, yeah, don't be shocked if you're playing against bots. Don't be shocked if they don't pay you. You know what you signed up for. At least you should. Hopefully you've watched at least some of my videos discussing this. What else did you have to say here? When sites start utilizing house bots to bring in more money. I don't know if anyone are doing that. Poker sites don't give a care about anything about making money. It's important to realize that casinos are businesses. Most businesses try to make money. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it is a-okay to try to make money. Now, the question is, do you care about your customers? That's a different issue. I think most casinos approach poker from the point of view of, let's rake them as much as we can, without making them think we're raking them for as much as we can. And that sounds a little bit rough. It's a tough thing, though. It's a tough thing because I realize it takes money to run a business. I mean, it takes money to run a poker training site. You all not believe how much money I spend each year on everything I have to pay for. It's millions of dollars a year I spend running pokercoaching.com. And, that's fine and good. Got to bring in money to pay for that stuff, right? Pot Genius says right here, bots are the donkeys too, quite often. I remember I used to play on ACR and I found this bot that was so bad. Like, you could just use specific bet sizes and it would always screw up. Because, like, on that site, they don't particularly care about the bots. They're just cool with it. And it's like, whatever. No, a lot of the bots have gotten pretty good now, though. Anyway, what are we talking about? Oh, yeah, it costs money to run businesses. You can't be mad at sites for paying their bills and trying to make their shareholders money. A lot of businesses are required to do everything they can to try to make their shareholders as much money as possible. And you also have to realize that quite often, these poker sites are owned by big companies. I think PokerStars deals with this, for example, where big company says to the small part of their company, PokerStars, you need to send your PokerStars players to our sport betting site, or whatever they're trying to tell them to do. I don't know. I'm using PokerStars as an example. I don't know if that's actually what they do, but I do know that PokerStars is part of a giant company. So, even if the people at PokerStars want to do everything they can to do everything possible to benefit poker, if the people in charge of them tell them, we really need to send people to our sport betting site, then what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They have no options, right? So I think a lot of people really want to crap on the online sites for having tough games. But you got to realize, poker is a tough game in 2021, and it's only going to get tougher moving forward. And online poker is going to get tougher at a very, very fast rate compared to live poker. Online games are much tougher than live games for many reasons, but the most obvious one is the game goes way, way, way faster. You play many, many, many more hands per hour online than you do live, and you can play more tables online than you can live. That results in the bad players going broke quicker. And it results in the average buy-in getting pushed down lower and lower and lower. So now, whenever someone goes to online poker and deposits $50 for the first time, they're drawing dead. Like, they're not going to win. And if they deposit $50 10 times in a row, they're not going to win. Because they just aren't skilled. So they're never going to have a good experience and they're going to quit. That's going to make people not really win a whole lot of money from online poker because there's no bad players coming in, or relatively few bad players coming in. And, money is limited to some extent. As much as they print the money, money is limited to some extent. So online is only going to get tougher and tougher. I'm not all that confident that online poker is going to thrive, except for exactly in tournaments where they don't allow re-entries. Tournaments with no re-entries online, still A+. All the other tournaments, not so much. Cash games are very, very tough. Live cash games are still really soft. You got to be smart about it. Tournaments are still very soft. You got to be smart about it. Would you ever consider quitting a game to book a profit, even when running and playing good? Well, running good is irrelevant. We discussed this earlier, Rashad. Go back and watch. It is ridiculous to quit the game when you're winning, because when you're winning, it presumes you have a positive win rate. All right. This has devolved into people talking about how to get around the rules on various online sites and which sites are legal and which ones are not. All right, then. Enough of that. Look, your time is limited. Spend it wisely. Spend it wisely. And, also, you want to protect yourself from downside risk to some extent. A lot of people make decisions that open themselves up to getting absolutely crushed, one way or another. I will give you an example that I experienced where, which one do I even want to use? Let's use Cake Poker. I don't know what happened with Cake Poker. It was an unlicensed, unregulated, illegal gambling site. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was. The games were really soft. They gave good rake back. It looked like a dream for pros. But you know what happened? They stopped paying out people. I'll give you another example. Lock Poker, another unlicensed, unregulated, illegal gambling site operating in America. A lot of people devoted years of their life grinding on this site. And everything was fine and good for a while. They got cash outs. Everything was good. Until it wasn't. They stopped cashing out players. They kept advertising, kept trying to get new players in the door, but they just stopped paying out players. Okay. What can you do? Well, a lot of people had all of their money on these sites. All of them. They had all the money on their sites that are no longer paying. They just spent a year of their life turning their $100 initial deposit into $20,000 and they can't get any of it. That was a blunder. That was a mistake on their part. They should have learned from the past. And I would highly recommend that you do not keep any legitimate amount of money that's valuable to you on any unlicensed, unregulated, illegal gambling site because history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And yeah, maybe everything will be fine, but when it's not, you don't want to get crushed. The tough thing is that a lot of people who work for and with these sites are telling you, yeah, your money's safe, load it all up. I saw a post by one of these illegal gambling sites the other day. It made me laugh. Their whole post was, don't worry, guys. Your money's safe here. Don't worry. It's safe here. If you have to post that on social media, you all can figure that one out. Anyway, be smart. Be smart. Don't open yourself up to getting crushed for no reason. Your time is limited. Spend it wisely and enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. If you don't enjoy doing something, do something else. It's okay. It's okay. You are not pot committed in most aspects of life, especially playing poker or whatever else you're doing for fun / entertainment / as a job even, right? If you are not enjoying your experience and you have other options, you should at least consider them. That's me for today. Hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, do me a quick favor, click the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks to everyone here in the comments. I appreciate it. Have 400 or something people here watching live. That's fun. Is it Monday today? There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. Hope you all make a productive week. Good luck in your games. Have fun. I appreciate all of you. And have a great holiday season.